Have you ever had a portrait where the model looked like an Oompa Loompa?
Hey, yo!
This is a portrait I screwed up in my beginner days, and to save you from the same pain, I'm here to teach you about white balance. I'll be going over the basics of white balance, how to control it within your camera, and how to use it for corrective and creative purposes. By the end of this video, I will guarantee you will be a lot more confident when it comes to this aspect of photography. There are two main ways to explain white balance. One is a very technical way with numbers and physics, and another is very intuitive by, well, just looking at the image. In an effort to be holistic, I will be explaining white balance with concepts from both camps. No physics, I promise. But I will be showing you some numbers that you need to understand because you will need to know them when you're editing or tweaking your camera settings. White balance, in the most intuitive sense, is how orange or blue an image is. There is a sweet spot of enough orangeness and blueness where objects in the photo that were white in real life will look white in the image. That is why we call it white balance. We care about white balance because it will correct the colors in your image to the same colors that you saw in real life with your eyes. We need to do this because different light sources have different color temperatures. Let me explain. For example, incandescent light bulbs tend to have a warmer yellow orangish color temperature, whereas outdoor light tends to have a more blue and cooler temperature. All of this can affect the way the colors will look in your photos. Light temperature is a spectrum where smaller numbers are more orange and warm and higher numbers are more cooler and blue. You may see warmer light during a sunset compared to seeing more colder light during overcast weather. FYI, the unit that color temperature is measured in is Kelvin. Almost all cameras will follow this scale. Now that we've gone over the theory of white balance, let's go over how we might want to use this in camera. You can put your white balance on auto mode, use a camera preset, or set it manually. I will be going over the pros and cons of each option. If you are finding value in this video, please hit the like button so this video can help other photographers learn about white balance. Auto white balance is great for outdoors in daylight, but not so great indoors. While this can be convenient, it's not always accurate and can lead to a few color consistencies within your photos. Since I primarily shoot outdoors, I am usually on the auto setting unless it's overcast weather. Most cameras have multiple white balance presets that you can use from daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten, and fluorescent. Each setting is designed to match the color temperature of a different type of light source. For example, if you're shooting outdoors on a sunny day, you would select the daylight setting, which has a color temperature of around 5,500 Kelvin. If you're shooting indoors under tungsten light, you would select the tungsten setting. Okay, pause. I realize in editing, the viewfinder screen looks really blue. You'll just have to take my word for this, but in real life, the viewfinder was not that blue. The image looks a lot more neutral and more balanced. The reason why it's so blue in the video is due to the auto white balance setting on my iPhone. Back to the video, which has a color temperature of around 3,200 Kelvin. Now, when we are using manual white balance, this is when having knowledge of color temperature comes into play. Moving around this temperature value tells the camera to treat all light that is that temperature as if it was white. Some photographers are adamant that you should always be shooting on manual white balance, but I'm gonna challenge that claim. You should be picking the white balance setting that is best for the scene that you're shooting in. If you are in a run and gun type situation, such as shooting sports, you do not have time to flicker around with the manual white balance. Instead, just put it on auto or a camera preset if you know that the color temperature will be consistent throughout the scene, and then just go ahead and shoot. You'll find that in most things in photography, a lot of decisions are made by a case-by-case basis, and there's very rarely a one-size-fits-all answer. Be smart about which white balance mode to pick. White balance can be used in two ways, either to color correct or for creative flair. These two are not mutually exclusive, you can do both. We can use white balance to color correct footage when the colors just look straight up wrong. We can fix the colors in post to make them look more accurate to real life. I use corrective white balance when I'm doing client work where I know the client only wants me to capture what the scene looked like in reality with no creative flair whatsoever. Be mindful not to overcorrect. If your scene has naturally warm lighting and you want to capture exactly what your eyes saw, don't change the white balance in post to the point where the lights look white, because that's just not what happened. As for creative use, this just gets a tiny bit more complicated because we need to understand the artistic language of colors. This is a whole video in and of itself, so very briefly, warm colors evoke feelings of nostalgia, comfort, and a sense of welcomeness, whereas cool colors can evoke feelings of calmness, authority, and relaxation. White balance, like many other things in photography, is a creative choice. There are white balances that are just straight up wrong, but there's a whole range of white balances that will look just fine for your image and can give your image just a little bit more artistic flair. It all comes down to you as the artist on what you want your image to convey. But all this talk about white balance is completely useless if you don't know how to expose your image correctly. Watch my video on the exposure triangle next.